So why do I mention all of this? I think the core of it is that I think we've developed this sort of virtue around the soprano range and color. And for men, the tenor and countertenor range and color, namely in pop music, but also in opera. Hey, before I start the rest of this video, I just want to note I was just watching this Cesare Siepi impersonation by Michael Spires. He is a professional operatic tenor who some have accused of being an actual bass baritone or baritone. Funnily enough, there are two copies of this video of him impersonating Cesare Siepi, who was a famous bass in the 20th century. And one video is full of comments saying that you're not a bass, you're a tenor. You can hear the tenor almost creep in. This is fun for him to do, but, like, you are a tenor. And the other one was like, I think you found your real voice, bud, you know? And it's funny that that's perceptual to me. Like, which one is it? He's actually a tenor just using a very low larynx, or he's a bass baritone, or baritone, he's not really singing that low, who is just using his mixed voice to great exploit to create a tenor sound. The dude can belt up to G5 in an operatic context, by the way, so, like, I don't know what you guys are on about. Whatever. He knows what he's... The soprano. The highest basic voice type of all human beings. The soprano sings from, well, it depends on the source. The generally accepted 2 octaves of tessitura is C4 to C6. Some might say that the soprano has as low a range in chest notes as G3, as far as it's comfortable, and as far as head notes, as high as F6, even G6. As is generally accepted, the soprano sings from C4 to C6. To me, the soprano voice is a very special voice type. For one, it's the only voice type that's head dominant, as opposed to chest dominant, or anything else. What the hell is wrong with you, Julie? I said, well, wrong. Well, wrong. It's also archetypally feminine, namely it's archetypally girlish. The voice is essentially childlike. It sits high, it's light, it's pure, it's agile, it's head dominant. It's a very girlish, childlike voice that most adult voices, well, unless you're a woman, in which case most voices are sopranos, most adult voices are too impure to really touch, at least alone. Well, I suppose that's a bit generalizing. I mean, there are multiple types of sopranos. The main one I'm referring to, I suppose, is more the light lyric or the coloratura soprano. Those are the more girlish sopranos. In the case of coloratura, namely the light or the lyric coloratura. There's also the full lyric, the spinto, and the dramatic soprano, and all of these bear a richness alongside having the sort of surreally high tessitura. So why do I mention all of this? I think the core of it is that I think we've developed this sort of virtue around the soprano range and color. And for men, the tenor and countertenor range and color, namely in pop music, but also in opera. Well, okay, so, like, maybe not the countertenor in opera, but the tenor is definitely given this sort of championed role as far as his voice and his characterization, as is the soprano given this prima donna role in an opera or operetta. Joan Sutherland, Maria Callas, Shirley Verrett, Luciano Pavarotti, Placido Domingo, Enrico Caruso, you know, they're all sopranos and tenors. And some of them even, you can debate whether that's true. But they're all recognized as sopranos and tenors. I do not know of any mezzos or baritones or contraltos or basses given the same heralding. I think we've built this virtue around soprano and tenor. By virtue, I mean we've kind of created this sense that it is the best way to be, the right way to be, the most powerful way to be. Maria Callas, Joan Sutherland, Renee Fleming. And I think it's worth noting that pretty much most of them, there are things about them that, except for like Pavarotti, really, there are things about them that transcend tenor or soprano. They have, rich lower registers that could compete against mezzos and contraltos, arguably. Yet they shine in the soprano or tenor tessitura. And people put that on them, that they are recognized and adored for that. In fact, the other day I was watching James Corden, and Andrea Bocelli was on there, and he was singing this lovely aria where much of it takes place in the baritone range. He goes down to C3 in it many times. But you can bet that he was able to fully dominate on those G4s in it, as well as that A4 at the end of it, which it had. There was always this power in his voice, and it carried up to the highest echelons of male chest voice. Quante partiro, that's what it's called. Forgive me for the butchered pronunciation. In fact, check this clip out from Franco Corelli.
Ma perché ogni sera pensa Napoli com'era, pensa Napoli com'era.
And this clip from Maria Callas. At some point, my outfit's going to change. Just warning you. So until the mid-19th century, there were types as much as there are in choirs today. There were sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses. The concept of mezzo-soprano and baritone did not exist yet. Now, the defining category to these is the soprano sfogato. The soprano sfogato basically was a contralto voice or alto voice that was able to extend or vent. Sfogare means to vent in Italian. Able to vent the voice up to soprano territory and soprano color even, and even into coloratura territory. Maria Malibran, Giuditta Pasta, Pauline Viardot, these were all considered soprano sfogato voices. They all could sing well below the treble staff, as well as well above it. So if you had a voice that was a bit timid or tense when it came to the upper notes, you'd probably be relegated to alto or bass, especially if your voice carried a sufficient amount of weight and power. The Fox system didn't exist then. So there were no dramatic sopranos, there were no lyric tenors, it was just tenor, alto, soprano, bass, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And if you were categorized as one of the four, then the greatest virtue is to be able to sing as many roles as possible. So you're expected to basically build your voice in that regard. Here's Maria Callas alluding to this in the
Has anybody told you, but al basso must be cantabile, but you are basso profondo and basso punto basta, because I cannot stand. No, this he's right, it's wrong. He is right to ask, and I will answer that. Because they have today a new style of saying basso profondo, basso cantabile, basso baritono, basso this, like the soprano, leggero, lirico leggero spinto, leggero, I don't know what. It is soprano basta. Once upon a time, one soprano did Norma, Puritana, Sonnambula, Lucia, The same woman. In fact, I have a program at home. I have Madame Malibran is written.
And in this, it seems like there was a principle of, can you improvise high? Can you improvise low? Can you go up to the, the skies, or can you sink under the ocean deep? It seemed like you were basically categorized based on the notes you had, in terms of extremity. So if you were a woman with an alto voice, that meant that you could, bring chest heft everywhere and go to low extremes for a woman. If you were a soprano, you could reach the highest of heights. If you were a tenor, you could belt to the upper limits of male voice. And if you were a bass, you could sing way down low. It also meant that if you were a tenor, you probably lacked bass notes. And if you were a soprano, you lacked alto notes at the lowest extremities, and vice versa for alto and bass. And actually, before the time of Rossini, notes above B5 were hardly ever used beyond just ornamentation. There was no climactic C6 or D6 or E6 or E flat 6. It was generally that you sang in around speaking range, even if a bit higher. And this went for sopranos too. That's the interesting thing about sopranos too. They tend not to sing in typical speaking range. You can identify a soprano in how they speak, but they tend to sing much higher than they speak compared to other voices. And of course, this is often more than true. I mean, Maria Callas, for instance, had a very low speaking voice, namely compared to the highest notes that she ever hit. Her voice often lay really comfortably in the third octave, and she was a soprano. Kind of wear a different outfit now. My question is there a virtue to being a soprano that is greater than being a mezzo? Is there a virtue to being a tenor that is greater than being a baritone? I mean, yes, there are types. There are types inherent to voices where, like, you will have a larger instrument and thus resonate lower, or you have a lighter instrument resonate higher, or you'll have a different vocal weight or timbre as a result of the size and dimension of your instrument. And the size and dimension of your thyroidnoid and the size and dimension of your cricothyroid. This will affect. But lower voices can always mix upward. Almost always they can mix upward. That's why Eva Podlish can hit E flat 6 as a contralto. You can also hit B flat 2. That's why Cecilia Bartoli has a range of E flat 3 to F sharp 6. That's why Joan Sutherland has a range of G3 to F sharp 6. Soprano sfugato is almost like a principle. It's like a mode of operating. If you have a lower voice, it behooves you to build an upper register alongside it. And even if you have a higher voice, it behooves you to build a lower register too, which you can do through lower larynx, fry, heavy use of chest voice. All of these can build a lower register. But transitioning from a lower voice type to a higher one is hardly unheard of. Grace Bumbry, Shirley Verrett, Placido Domingo, possibly even Franco Corelli are all prime examples of this. Mario Delmonico was trained as a baritone at one point and then became a dramatic tenor. Wait, that's not right. I think he was a lyric tenor. Anyway, those are prime examples. And Maria Callas and Joan Sutherland are arguably examples of this as well. And in the pop world, we have Mariah Carey, Ville Morton Harkett. And now my hair is different. So we have Mariah Carey, Ville Morton Harkett, Mina Mazzini, Dean Carn, Happy Rhodes. Well, even Kate Bush, to be honest. She had a pretty strong low register, and I read somewhere that her natural sitting voice was actually lower than she suggests in her recordings. Her early recordings. It becomes more apparent later on that her voice is deeper than initially presented. But back then, like, where's that come from? If you are a mezzo and you're, relegated to this set of notes. Lisa Fisher, Chris Cornell, Brendan Urie, Haley Williams. Who else is a guy that I can name? For some reason, I can't name many. Tom York. these are voices that have as much facility in the 5th octave as in the 3rd. And they're all listed as like, almost all of them are listed as tenors or sopranos, or they show great prowess in the tenor or soprano range. And yet there's this, strong low register there too. I don't know. Am I rambling? Probably. The point is that I think it's just a continuation of the video I last made on how voice types are basically like weight classifications that you can basically diet and exercise out of and into. It's difficult to do, but you can definitely rewire your voice to, sit in a different register. I'm speaking a bit lower than I was earlier, yes, but at the same time, I'm not speaking like a bass baritone or a tenor. This is still a woman's voice. I wouldn't even say it's contralto necessarily. Contralto would be like more like this, I guess it depends on the contralto. And even then, like, speaking voices can vary greatly among each type, and there's so many cases of women and men singing up to soprano range, even though they're, contraltos, mezzos, tenors, baritones, bass baritones even, Barry White went up to E5 once, like, this is a thing. Another addendum to that point is that I wonder how many voices have actually trained themselves to sing soprano or sing tenor, consciously or subconsciously, just because they feel that, or know that that will be the most prestigious thing to do, be the most captivating thing to do. Like, a baritone is basically singing conversationally relative to a tenor, A soprano is singing the least conversationally of any voice type I've ever seen, In fact, women sing a lot less conversationally than men do, in opera. And singing in whistle range is just not speaking at all, Singing in A5, how many people speak up there, You'll have the, that stuff be going on. That's the highest I can go right now safely. I think there's a primal satisfaction that's gotten from really high voices, really high ranges. The bringing so much weight up as much as a voice has up to such a height, it almost evokes flying to us. So I think that's really a big part of it. It signifies a freedom, an unbridledness. I think that's why. And so I don't think that is a lost capacity for most people, to be quite honest. Maybe high has a different standard for, a bass or a tenor or a mezzo-soprano, But, like, every voice has capacity to sing much higher than the tessitura given. And I think that there is a capacity to allow your ground to sort of go up. If high notes are flying, the ground can be brought up. You can lift yourself to a higher foundation. And then suddenly you stand among the stars, so to speak, I wish I could show more vocal ideas. I'm not that comfortable with my voice right now. My singing voice. I think that it still does need work. Namely the upper reaches of it. I can do, little croons like, cry me a river, but see what I mean? Cry me a river! It still sounds forced. So I'm still working on things. And that wasn't even that high. That said, there are some things I've been working on to improve. In fact, that was sort of a regression, what I just did. So there's this little exercise that Zoe taught me. Zoe Alexandria on YouTube under the name Zoe Alexandria. I just go like this. Breathe in deeply, like I'm pregnant, as she says. Then breathe in again. And then the breath supports the sound, and then there's less fry. Uh, 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 Hey guys, now that it's later in the day, let me try that again. I think I'm learning how to support the sound more. I feel a bit of tension still in my neck, but, I'm gonna try again. I don't know what to do. I really don't. I read that thing. Okay. I'll be there with the love that'll shelter you. I'll be there with the love that'll comfort you.